All right, I'm here at PorcFest with the chairman of the board, the chairman of the Libertarian Party, Nicholas Sarwark.
How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous.
You know, just before this interview, I overheard you talking about how here at PorcFest, it's kind of like Twitter come to life. Would you care to elaborate?
So there was a talk about free speech and Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act where I pointed out that there really isn't a publisher-platform distinction. That's not a thing that's in the law. You just have to use alternative platforms, and hopefully they'll get the other platforms out of the way if they're being too censory. And some guy got up after me and said, "You're actually wrong about the law. It really means something else.
You don't
understand the First Amendment."
It doesn't go well.
And I was like, normally I have to be on Twitter to have people mansplain to me what law says.
It's kind of a theme here, though. It's funny how sort of the kind of conversations you're used to having on the internet suddenly just spring to life here at PorcFest in funny and interesting ways, I think you might say.
It's been pretty entertaining. I've noticed that a lot of people that maybe are less pleasant on the internet are a lot nicer when they're in person within arm's reach. Sometimes vice versa.
What actually brought you here to PorcFest? Is this your first time? Have you been
This
here
is my
before?
first time at PorcFest. I actually was an early Free State Project signer, and this year they invited me to come speak, do a couple of panels, and I came out. It's amazing. It's a wonderful time.
And the panel you just did this morning was about basically libertarianism and populism and sort of how we should respond to the effects of populism in our sort of political culture. And I think you kind of had some disagreements with Phil Magnus and David Schlesinger. They had sort of I guess their take was more that libertarianism should take a sort of defensive outlook on politics. And you sort of had a different outlook on that. Would you care to expand a little bit on how you would disagree with just the framing of it as defensive?
So there's a long history in libertarian thought that we are a tiny remnant that kind of keeps these ideas alive and for some future age where they'll be accepted by people. And I kind of reject that. I think that libertarianism has the opportunity to present positive solutions to people that can appeal to these same problems that lead to them following populists. We can provide good free market solutions to their problems and go on offense rather than staying on defense. Go out and try and win the election instead of just trying to make it be less bad.
What are your responses to like an argument I think you hear a lot about the kind of candidates that libertarians should run is a lot of people will concede, well, we're not going to win anyway. And I know you take exception to that kind of take on things. We're not going to win anyway. So what do you say to people that have that attitude that if we're not going to win anyway, we should just put up whoever talks about liberty the best or whoever has the best ideas, and they don't necessarily want to factor in any of the normal things you might factor in when it comes to political races?
It's kind of like if you are a football team that has a really bad record in the year and you go out against the number one team, the Buffalo Bills, yep. And you go out against the New England Patriots, for example, who I think the Bills really just kind of love and they're friends with.
Every 5 years we get a win on them, but
you want to go out there and you still have to play by the rules of the game of football, right? You can't go out there and do interpretive dance just because we're not going to win. You have to go out and try and play by the rules. You can do some creative stuff when you're a last place team. You can throw some trick plays. You can do some things that are outside the box, but the game's still the game. And that's how libertarians, I think, should approach politics is, yes, if you are unlikely to win, that means that you have a lot more freedom to do things, but some rules of politics, knocking on doors, talking to people, listening to their issues, they apply whether or not you're a long shot candidate or an establishment candidate. And so I think we should be bold in our messaging, but we should also remember that this is a game in which the score is determined by votes, and that's how we have to play the game.
I'm not going to ask you as chairman to pick a specific person, but just kind of going off what you said there, what would your ideal Libertarian Party presidential candidate, essentially the person who's going to be the face of libertarianism in the 2020 cycle, what are some of the qualities that kind of person would have?
So ideally, I want to see a Libertarian presidential candidate that is as close as possible to the Libertarian Party platform, so that there's fewer things that you have to either explain that there's a difference or apologize for. And that also creates a longer-term solution, right? If a candidate runs on the platform's still there after the campaign's over, people are more likely to stick around. But I also want somebody who has the organizational skills to raise a lot of money, to get on the phone with donors, to be able to get media interviews, handle them well, present our ideas well, create a positive message for people. So I want a good candidate who's a good libertarian, and finding that right balance, because sometimes you get a really great libertarian who's not so good with the people. There's a couple people like that. Or you'll get somebody who's really great with the people, but is not totally aligned with all of the platform. You want to find that happy medium where it's a lot of both, even if you can't maximize any one.
How do you manage trying to find that medium or keep everyone happy within the Libertarian Party? Whereas I'm sure you realize people have very different opinions on these sorts of things. And I mean, are there certain lines where you would just say, you know, this person is in no way a Libertarian, should not be associated with the party? Or are there kind of situations where you say, okay, this person believes in 80% of what we say. 20%, I agree, I'll state that this person's wrong, but they have so many other great qualities and get the message out there in such a way that we should still welcome them in. Where do you sort of draw that? I mean, not specifically kind of position-wise, but how do you sort of try to find that balance?
Yeah, so somebody asked me this the other day about Tulsi Gabbard, who has a couple of libertarian positions on foreign intervention, for example, but on a lot of things is not very in line with the libertarian platform. I encourage anyone who wants to fight for human freedom, who wants a freer country, who agrees with us on any number of issues, to come and join the Libertarian Party and work with us together to try and make this a more free country. When it comes to the presidential candidate, that's going to be up to the delegates. So if Howard Schultz, who really cares a lot about the national debt, but maybe is off of us on things like gun control, wants to seek our nomination, I encourage him to do it. I leave it to the delegates in Austin next May. They're going to decide what's libertarian enough. I'm not the gatekeeper. I'm the recruiter. I bring people in.
That's not what I saw on the internet. I don't know.
The delegates decide whether or not they get nominations, right?
Finally, Nick, what's your favorite part of being here at PorcFest, especially with it being your first time? Obviously, it's cool to have the VIP bracelet. That helps, but...
It definitely helps as far as having free drinks and food all the time. That's pretty cool.
Well, there's no such thing as a free drink. That's a phrase I saw somewhere.
It's the theme of our upcoming convention. But no, it's just the sense of community, I think, is the best thing that I've found being here at PorcFest. I've heard about it for years, you know, kind of staying involved in the Free State Project, even though I haven't been able to move yet. And actually being here and seeing how people just come together, there's a lot of cooperation, mutual aid, all the things we talk about and what we want to see in that outside society, those values are here. And when you feel them, there's something about it. It's like addictive. I don't know. Is this your first time?
I was here last year, so yeah.
Did you feel that vibe? Did you feel like, you know, maybe I don't want to live where I live right now? Maybe
I didn't feel that
specifically
specifically because I live in California and the weather's very nice. But you do feel the sense of community where you can just be around the campfire and, you know, you hear someone talking about the Fed and that's not weird. Whereas if I'm at a bar in LA and I hear that, I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? So it is an interesting thing to be in a place where people all sort of have the same vibe, even if we disagree on all sorts of random things in the middle of the night. But we all are here for the similar sort of reason that we all want to see a freer world in our lifetimes, as they say.
Yeah.
Nick, thanks a lot. I'll see you around.
Thanks.
Take care.